Funding for This Is Nashville comes from you, our listeners, and Music City Prep Clinic, Nashville-based provider for PrEP and offering comprehensive sexual health services in an environment designed to be safe, professional, and shame-free. Learn more at musiccityprep.org.
I'm Khalil Ekulona, and this is Nashville. Some of us keep to-do lists. While cleaning the gutters doesn't sound appealing, traveling to a special desired place in the world looks like a good time. More often than not, we put things we really want to do at the bottom of those lists because life, right? We prioritize the things we have to do to stay afloat, to pay the bills and provide for our families. Maybe later, we can do what we want to do. But life really doesn't work that way. I think the pandemic has shown us that much. Time is precious. Later this hour, we'll talk with a few people who have been living life to the fullest and going through their bucket lists, one item at a time. But first, it's time for At Us. Yes, every Thursday, we're taking time to read the comments so you don't have to. I'm literally encouraging you to at us on Twitter at This Is Nashville, on Instagram at This Is Nashville_WPLN, and at WPLN News on Facebook. Joining me now with a look back at the past week is our digital lead, Anna Gallegos-Cannon. Hey, Anna.
Hey, Khalil. Glad to see you back in studio, and also glad to be back in studio.
Thank you so much. It's glad to be back.
So anyways, do you remember last Friday's show about meat?
Oh, yes, obviously, I do.
Well, so does our loyal listener, Anthony DeGeorge, who goes by Salute Slut on Twitter.
Okay, that is a great Twitter handle.
Right. So Anthony tweeted us a few times during the episode with some pushback. He's a vegan and took issue with some of the framing of the episode. So our executive producer, Andrea Tedhope, called him up yesterday to make sure we understood his concerns. His biggest issue was not with the guests themselves, but how we handled our guests who farm and raise cattle to slaughter.
I understood Beef Farmer is going to promote his product and his work. I was just really disappointed to hear him talking about climate change. Beef farmers have a financial incentive to keep people eating beef. And of course, they're going to take an anti-science view when it comes to climate change. The idea that there's any form of beef consumption that is not hurting the planet is just absurd. I mean, it's like clean burning coal. It's not a thing that exists.
I mean, it's a really good point. We couldn't have had the conversation about meat without talking about climate change and climate science. But as Anthony points out, we really didn't have an impartial guest to tackle that.
I would think that in the future, you maybe want to, avoid having people who are not experts talk about science, or at the very least have, someone else there to either give contradictory evidence or at least, give the other side of the opinion if it's a matter of opinion.
Yeah, well, we totally agree with you, Anthony. Being fair and balanced with our guest lineup is very important to us. Mm-hmm. We'll make sure for future episodes we at least be prepared to script a counterpoint.
Plus, we'll definitely have more conversations dedicated to climate change and climate science. We've already had a few. I'm thinking about our Earth Day episode on green space in Nashville.
For sure. Also, we've been cooking up a few episode ideas that we think will be a lot more appealing to our vegan and vegetarian listeners. So just a spoiler alert, one of them is about a cow sanctuary in West Tennessee. So stay tuned for that. And also, we have to give a shout out to our pescatarian producer, Tasha A.F. Lemley, for being up to the challenge of putting together a meat episode.
Yes, as you said, she really cooked up something really special and tasty for us. So, I was out a few days this week. Catch me up on what happened.
Well, we definitely missed you here in the studio. And on Tuesday's show, we discussed hate speech, and we had 3 PhDs as our guests.
Okay, that is impressive.
It really was. But one of our listeners was not impressed with how we promoted the episode.
I wonder what their beef was.
So you know how we tweet a photo of our guest every day before the show? Because, I really want our listeners to know who our guests are.
Yeah.
Well, listener Jeremiah replied on Twitter to say, why does your graphic give the doctor title to the two men, but not to the woman who is also a PhD?
Wait, so the graphic only says doctors for the dudes?
That's right. Now, it really was an honest oversight. Both Saleh Sabetny and Cesare Warren refer to themselves as doctors on their websites. Our other guest lists herself as Sophie Bjork James, PhD. Now, not everyone with a PhD necessarily wants to be called a doctor, though. And to be clear, we asked her how she wanted to be addressed during the show, and we honored her request by just calling her by her name. Even so, we 100% did not mean to diminish her accomplishments in any way. So we wanted to take a chance to let everybody know that Dr. Sophie Bjork James holds a PhD in anthropology from City University of New York, as well as a master's in education from the University of Toronto. Her work has also been featured on NBC Nightly News and NPR's All Things Considered, as well as in articles by Reuters, The New York Times, and Vox.
Among others.
That's right. And in addition to all of this, she has also co-edited the book Beyond Populism, Angry Politics and the Twilight of Neoliberalism, and she is also the author of the book Divine Institution, White Evangelicalism's Politics of the Family.
Yeah, so I know I already said impressive, but now I really mean it.
Also, speaking of Dr. Sophie Bjork James, she tweeted about the show after, saying that it was a great conversation. But there was one thing she didn't get to touch on during the show. She said, quote, "The best defense against white nationalism is a robust democracy." She also went on to say that white nationalists try to isolate specific groups as separate. Having multiple racial, multi-religious coalitions rallied around affected communities is crucial to both support hate crime victims and to demonstrate that the community is united.
Preach, Dr. Bjork James, preach. Is there anything else, Anna?
Yes, so I have another spoiler alert.
Okay.
For next week, our producer, Rose Gilbert, is putting together a Citizen Nashville episode about childcare. And so we'd really like to hear from parents, grandparents, and guardians about their experiences looking for childcare in and around Nashville. So right now, we have a forum on our website, thisisnashville.org, where parents can share their stories. And, you know, if there's any childcare providers out there who'd like to share their experience, we will happily listen to it as well.
Awesome. Thanks to our digital lead, Anna Gallegos-Cannon, for this roundup. Anna, we will see you next week. Same time, same place?
Of course, and our listeners know where to find me.
Don't forget to add us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, and let's keep the comments coming. Also, fill out our community survey online to let us know what topics you want us to cover at thisisnashville.org. It is super easy and quick and helps us produce shows with your needs and interests in mind. We have to take a short break. When we come back, we're talking bucket lists, baby. Do you have a bucket list? Have you accomplished something wild? Tell us your stories at This Is Nashville. We'll be right back.
Funding for This Is Nashville comes from you, our listeners, and Music City Prep Clinic, Nashville-based provider for PrEP and offering comprehensive sexual health services in an environment designed to be safe, professional, and shame-free. Learn more at musiccityprep.org.
I'm Khalil Ekalona, and this is Nashville. Okay. So it's honestly hard to believe we weren't really kicking around the term bucket list before 2007. But I guess that's pretty much true. That was the year that The Bucket List came out in theaters, starring Jack Nicholson and Morgan Freeman. They played a couple of elderly, terminally ill cancer patients who got a new lease on life, made a list of all the things they wanted to do before they died, and really lived it up in their final months. They went skydiving, flew over the North Pole, raced around the California Speedway, rode motorcycles on the Great Wall of China, and went on a lion safari in Tanzania, to name a few. The film really popularized the idea of a bucket list, inspiring folks around the world to draft bucket lists of their own. Over the past week, we've been asking you all, what's on your bucket list? Here's what we heard.
On my bucket list is travel with purpose. And by that, I mean traveling to places where I could make an impact as a muralist.
One of the things I've knocked off my bucket list is affordable housing. Wanted that for so long, and I finally got that.
My son and I, who is 11, we are big Buffalo Bills fans, so we have decided that we are going to try and catch a Bills game in every NFL stadium in the U.S.
My ultimate bucket list would be to sleep under the northern lights in glass igloos in Iceland.
I would love to travel and explore places related to my heritage, other kinds of consumption, right? Buying things and having things and sort of climbing a success path in life aren't as fulfilling for me.
So I guess mine would be releasing an album, writing a television show, writing a movie, and becoming a father. So I can completely get down with some of those. Now, we're inviting a few folks who've come to bucket lists in their lives for different reasons. My first guest is Gwen Moore. She's a writer and an artist who has used her bucket list over the years to keep her mind open to where life may take her. Gwen, welcome to This is Nashville.
Hi, Khalil.
So tell me, when did you start thinking about bucket lists?
Well, I think it must have been shortly after that movie. Our book club said, have you got a bucket list? And none of us had done that, so we all did it. And somehow it struck me as very important, and so I've saved it and referred back to it.
Well, tell me, what was your life like before that?
Well, that's a funny thing. I had some pretty interesting experiences. I was a songwriter for a while in Nashville and didn't ever imagine doing that or being a background singer, but that's what I did for a while. And then I wrote a couple of books. They haven't been published, but I got them out of me, which was big. Mm-hmm. And, I thought, it's time to dream again. I really need to dream.
So what type of dreams did you have?
Well, I am a big traveler. My parents gave me that legacy. So on my bucket list, I've got live in Paris more than a month and spend a week on an island. I didn't say where, doesn't matter. And return to Israel. I lived there in 1986 and 87, and I want to live in the artist colony across from the old city in Jerusalem.
Now, we've been in this pandemic and it's changed a lot of people in their outlook in life. I wonder, how did the pandemic influence you on your journey?
Well, interestingly, I found out that I am more comfortable being alone than I dreamed I would be. Because I've always worked in offices my whole adult life. And I thought I would be very lonely, but I wasn't. It turns out I had enough internal life going on that staying in touch with friends through Zoom was really satisfying, and I did okay.
That's awesome. My next guest is a veteran who came at his bucket list just a little differently. Joe Murray, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much.
Now, Joe, you're 80 years young, correct?
Yes.
So what drew you to create or fulfill your bucket list?
Well, it just started out as a journey through life. I am a person that love to travel, do new things. I've always anticipated and things that I always wanted to do and I was able to do. My journey started after high school, went into the United States Air Force. First station was in Germany for 3 years, returned home, started a family. Stayed here in Nashville for about 10 years. And I said, I want to go out and see some country. Mm-hmm. So I sold my house, packed up my furniture, my family, and we headed to Phoenix, Arizona. And that's where my bucket list began.
Did you have any pushback from your wife or your kids during this time?
I think they were a little tired of Nashville also. My children were very young.
Okay.
And so she agreed to go because she wanted to see some country also.
So I understand this isn't a traditional bucket list. You made this list after you did all these things.
After I did most of these things, I always had a list of things I did, places I had gone. And I said, well, it's time to make a list and pass it on to my children so they will know what Dad has done in his life. And they shared a lot of these things also with me.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
How did that make the experience different? Because a lot of times we think of it as something where, you know, it's what people do when they're older and they retire, but you got to share these monumental experiences with your family, particularly your young kids.
They needed, I wanted them to go to a place where they could share with other cultures, other races, languages, and just see some world too. Because a lot of children never leave their hometown. And I didn't want my children to experience that.
So you served in the Air Force.
Yes.
You saw a lot of the world.
I sure did.
Did that kind of influence your decision?
Well, most of the world I saw at that time was all a part of just being in the military, just traveling around. But most of my bucket list is in the United States.
Okay.
Yeah.
Have you always been like an inquisitive, active person?
Oh, yes, ever since I was a child.
Okay.
Very inquisitive. I want to see how everything worked, how everything went from one phase to the other. I was a science student, and I won two first place science awards and a second place science award at Vanderbilt. So I was just a very inquisitive person.
Gwen, I want to ask you about that. Have you been naturally inquisitive about life?
Oh, yeah. That was part of my heritage. My dad always asked questions and met new people and figured out what they were doing. And yeah. So intellectual curiosity is part of what makes life so exciting.
If you're just tuning in, this is Nashville, and I'm your host, Khalil Ekulona. We're talking this hour about bucket lists. What's on yours? And have you checked anything off it? Tweet us at This Is Nashville. Okay, so I'm anxious to hear more about what's on your lists. Gwen, you gave us a few items from your list, but what else is on there?
So I've got visit Tonga and make a retreat to Gethsemane Abbey, where Thomas Merton used to live in Kentucky. That should be pretty easy. Just haven't done it. And live in New York City. I mean, I'm a big movie lover, so of course I want to spend some time in New York.
So why Tonga?
Tonga, because the first movie I remember seeing as a little girl was South Pacific. And I thought it was set in Tonga, but it actually was filmed in Tahiti. So I've really wanted to go to the wrong place all my life.
Tahiti's definitely on my list. Okay, so if you go to live in New York City, which borough are you living in?
You know, I'm not sure. The Bronx really appeals to me because you've got a great view of the city. But, you know, of course, Manhattan would be a dream.
Yeah, Manhattan's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Which one do you really want to get done?
Of all the things on my list, probably one I haven't mentioned yet, help people know God better through books and music and teaching and counseling. That's the biggest. And I think I'm doing it and will do it.
I like that one because it's you sharing and giving to other people. Sometimes when we think about our bucket lists, it's experiences that you can have alone or maybe share with significant others or close loved ones, but you want to kind of give of yourself for everyone else. What's behind that?
Well, I think mostly I've received so much from other people through the years in relationship, in church settings, some good, some ill. You know, I can be a good warner for people to avoid certain situations. And also just how life has enriched my experience through God being involved. Having a spiritual life has made my life so much richer. I just want other people to have that richness in theirs.
All right, Joe, you actually brought your physical list today.
Yes.
What's on it?
Oh, I came up with 10 things that I wanted to make sure that I had on my bucket list, and I've accomplished all of those.
Mm-hmm.
I moved to Arizona with my family, so that's where it began. Okay, I'm a very a soul that just loves to dig into ditches and just see what I can come up with sometime.
Okay.
So it started in Arizona. I traveled. I've traveled across Route 66.
All right, I'm familiar.
And if anyone wants to see this country from the east to the west, take a trip, take your family, and travel 66. You just would believe what you could see that and experience.
Get your kicks on Route 66, as they say.
Yes. I had opportunity to travel through the Grand Canyon, the small canyon. And when I reached Arizona, I always loved Westerns about Colorado and Arizona, about the miners that in the early 17th, 18th that wanted to go and get rich on gold.
Okay.
So I said, well, while I'm here, I'm going to go and learn how to pan gold. And it's an exciting thing to go down into the foothills and down to the creeks and spend some time there panning gold.
Did you find any gold?
Oh, yes, yeah. I had an opportunity to go back into the hills where the old gold miners had left old gold trailings. I shouldn't have gone there by myself, but I'm just a wandering soul, you know. Also, I had an opportunity to go to the Four Corners.
Okay.
And the Four Corners in the West is Arizona, Colorado, Utah, and New Mexico.
Yes, sir.
And at one point, they all touched together.
Yeah.
And at that very spot, there's a steel plate on that corner. And you could go to all 4 states just by making 1, 2, 3 steps.
Yes, I've done that myself.
Have you?
When I lived in New Mexico. Now tell me.
It's exciting.
It's so exciting, and it's beautiful as well. What do you think these experiences that you've had have really taught your children about life and our desires?
Okay. By taking my children with me, I was able to take them to all of the states in that area and give them an opportunity to see what's there. And especially the Hoover Dam. That's an exciting place that everybody should want to see. I love fishing, to travel up the river, through the Grand Canyon, through the Colorado River, all the way up to the dam. What a sight.
Now, sometimes we use the responsibilities of life as an excuse to avoid fulfilling our desires. Gwen, how do you balance pursuing your dreams and still doing all the things we have to stay afloat?
I learned early in my life that I needed a lot of creative outlet as well as just income. And so I have always made some time in my work life for writing or painting or doing something creative. And I'm so grateful that, I've been able to experience both worlds along the way and not just put it all off for retirement like some folks are tempted to do.
So tell me, how are you going about completing your list?
Well, the truth is, I've only satisfied one of my 12 bucket list items. That was going back to Cardiff Castle. I had been there before and hadn't been there in many years. And I had a knee replacement. And I said, okay, in rehab, my goal is to walk in Europe again. And a couple years later, I got to go with my brother and sister-in-law to England and Wales and returned to Cardiff Castle. And that was just unexpected. So that was very exciting to me. The rest of them, I'm going to just keep on trucking, and focus on them and watch them come to pass, I believe.
I think one of the most intimidating things about a bucket list is that, you make this lofty list and then never get around to doing any of it, So how do you grapple with the idea of failure? I mean, do you even see it that way, Gwen?
No, I don't. I think it makes a difference in how you live your life, whether you have opened your heart to possibility and dreams and desires. They're so motivating. And I think we'll have a much richer life just by dreaming, not to mention having all those dreams fulfilled. I think it just opens us up to life in its fullness.
Joe, how do you see it?
I see it that since I've already completed it, two other things on here that I just wanted to do as a child. I loved airplanes. I loved flying. I used to build them and fly them. So in the last 2 years, I had an opportunity to take some flying lessons on the 172, the small aircraft.
Okay.
And I was able to go up in some training and actually take the wheel and did some maneuvers.
That's cool.
I also had an opportunity to take some glider lessons, and I also had a chance to go up and operate that also. And that was about the last one, and the favorite one of all is a tandem skydive, which was on my last one on my list, here in Nashville. And that is something awesome to do.
When did you go on this tandem skydiving tour?
It was 2 years ago. I was 78 years old.
Okay.
And it was on my birthday. And what a great birthday gift that was.
Yes, sir.
That was my gift.
That's something else. Okay, so you finished your list,
yes.
But come on, you're as you said, you're self-proclaimed very curious person. Is there anything else you want to accomplish?
One other thing. I have never had opportunity to do this because I've never been in the right place at the right time. But I'm a humanitarian, and I've always wanted to be involved in a humanitarian movement where there was demonstrating for the right things to do to help people. Mm-hmm. And if I may, I would like to sum this up. I had a small poem that I wrote for my son.
Please.
Okay. And the subject of this poem was World, Who Am I? Because that's always been a question. I offered much to family and country. I thank God for grace and mercy. I have taught all I have known. I have compensated with blood, sweat, and tears. I have overcome my doubts and fears. I have soared over mountains, and now I'm free. Well, world, who am I? I am me.
That is beautiful.
Thank you. I'm not a poet, but this came into my mind. I just want to sum it up.
Joe Murray and Gwen Moore, I want to thank you both for being on the show and sharing your stories. And all I can say is I want to be like the both of you when I grow up.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We have to take a short break. Now, the term bucket lists really comes from kicking the bucket. When we come back, we'll hear from a few people who have had to grapple with the idea of death at a young age, which ultimately led them both to create bucket lists of their own. And again, what's on your bucket list? Tweet us at This Is Nashville. We'll be right back. I'm Khalil Ekalona, and this is Nashville. When we think about bucket lists, we tend to imagine them as something for the latter stages in life. A list of things to do post-retirement. At least that's how the insurance and travel company commercials like to depict it. But what about when you're younger and you have a life-changing experience? My next guests are two people who were thriving in their careers and were on a clear path until something knocked them off their feet and made them reevaluate their lives. Nicholas Calvin and Jeremy Lister, welcome to This is Nashville.
Thanks for having.
Thank you.
So, Nicholas, let's start with you. Tell me about yourself. What was the life plan you had for yourself when you were 18?
Well, nice to meet you, Khalil. And I'm a Nashville native. I'm born and raised in Nashville. This is like my home. Went to East Nashville Magnet School. And growing up before my 18th birthday, I had the whole life of just graduating, going to college. I did go to Howard University, getting my law degree from there, becoming a politician. Not only that, I was really big into church. So I thought I'd become a pastor, get married, have the kids, the traditional life, start a church in Nashville. And, just go from there, just spread out and grow. But from there, I had something that stopped me, which was HIV. So I had to really reorganize some things, Khalil.
How did that news affect you?
Wow. So it actually affected me in October of 2013, which was the first semester of my senior year of high school. So grappling with that while also a senior, really trying to be happy at the same time. I'm about to go to college next year and things of that nature. But really coming back to, I was raised with a good family. I had a lot of great things instilled in me and things of that nature. So it helped me. It helped to push me. I was still living with my mom, so my mom is a great woman, and she really made sure I was okay. She never showed her emotions. I'm sure she had a lot of things on the back end, but in front of me, she was always very strong, always supportive, asking what I needed and stuff like that, never condemning me, and that really did help me. But of course, once I got out of the house, things kind of changed a little bit.
Now, hold on a second. You're 17 years old.
Yes.
And you discovered that you're HIV positive. That's not something that a lot of 17-year-olds can really relate to. You had the support of your mother, but how did you feel? You're like, okay, this plan I had for my life has totally been thrown upside down. I'm still a young person, still a kid in many respects. What was your thought process?
I came to a place of looking at an end at some point, not knowing what tomorrow may hold. Everybody has so many aspirations and stuff. But at that point, I really just questioned everything. Again, I had a lot of people pushing me. I was very involved with my school. I was on the Mayor's Youth Council. I did a lot of work with Planned Parenthood in high school. So I had a lot of people around me who were aware of the disease and still kept me at a very private place to still support me in a private place. So they still pushed me, but internally, Khalil, I was scared. On the outside, I kept a smile on my face. At school, I still attended school every day. My friends knew nothing, but inside I was scared, yeah.
Now, Jeremy, you were a touring musician when you had a kind of a wake-up call. Tell us about this main time in your life.
Yeah, I've always struggled with anxiety and depression, and found the use of alcohol and other substances as a way to medicate myself. And then that eventually turned into addiction. And I think with my career path, it was sort of normalized. So it got to a place where it was killing me, and I knew it was bad, but I just continued to do it because it was my medicine. And and I was sort of trapped in this picture of like my identity was stuck of like I have to have this so I can be a touring musician, so I can be someone people like. And but then it was putting me in bad situations. I was getting in trouble. I was blacking out. And eventually I got to a place where my liver and internal organs were suffering, and I had pre-cirrhosis, and eventually I was on tour, a big tour. I'd been on a reality TV show on NBC, and we were on a big bus tour, and I was having panic attacks or in the ER at least once a week. And a doctor finally came to me and was like, from everything I see here, you have about a year to live.
So here you have some success. You're on tour, kind of, like you said, it's normalized in that field, alcohol and drug abuse. And then you reached this breaking point. What was happening in your mind?
It was scary. I think I knew that my lifestyle was dangerous, and I knew that I had a potential of dying young. But like when the reality of that hit me, I was like, well, I've got to do something. I can either keep doing this and die very young, or in my head at the time, I was like, or I could be a hermit because I won't be anybody without this. My life will be very, very small if I give up these things. But now I've come to see that my life is so much bigger because I gave up those things.
Mm-hmm. Here you are both with these life-changing events, and you're young. You're facing the idea of death long before you thought you would have to. Nicholas, I'd like to hear what you did next. What was your next step after your diagnosis?
I just took action. I kept moving. When I was diagnosed, shout out to Nashville Cares in South Nashville. When I was diagnosed at Nashville Cares at the age of 17, I remember the lady coming in and she gave me the test result, and I immediately cried. My mentor, she hugged me really tightly, but I immediately got back up and I said, I'm going to be all right. And from there, I went to my grandparents' house because that's who I was closest to. My mom, she was at work, told my grandparents. And at that point, they were in a light but still serious note. They stopped me from crying and had me comforting them. Mm-hmm. And then from there, my mom being a strong woman. So I kept moving. I still graduated in the top 15% of my class, still went to Howard, still graduated with honors, all that and above. And I still soared to the top. Went to Howard my freshman year, ran for Mr. Freshman. And I kind of, in a sense, not in a great way, but I kind of, in a sense, started to ignore the HIV. I started taking 5 pills, December 2013. And at that point, I had my mom cooking breakfast every day, lunch at school, dinner. So I was on that still consistent schedule. So I was not out of, I had something going on, but internally, I was still in the regular function. It wasn't until I went to Howard in my second semester of my freshman year, I kind of started falling off tangent. Like I said earlier, I was a part of the Mayor's Youth Council here in Nashville. I interned for Congressman Cooper and other people here in Nashville. And when I went to Howard, I was set on doing stuff in politics. I interned for Congressman Cooper in his D.C. office in the House, and that was amazing. And I was even pledging for a men's organization on campus at Howard. And I was doing all that. I was still functioning, but I wasn't taking care of the internal Nicholas. And I remember one of the producers who called me about this interview, she said one thing. She said, what was one of your bucket lists before you were diagnosed with HIV? And I said it was to impact others, to be the examples others wanted to see, but I was not the example for myself at that time.
So how did you take care of inner Nicholas?
I took care of inner Nicholas simply, Khalil, by coming back home. I was at the place where I was in a relationship that wasn't functioning very well. I wasn't doing the best with my studies, and my support system was in Nashville. I did have a lot of people in D.C. that knew of me, but they really didn't know the Nicholas that needed to be nurtured, the Nicholas that needed to be protected. And although they wanted me to stay, it was time for me to come home. And since I've been home, I started working at Nashville Cares, and that was where the nurturing process really started, Khalil.
If you're just tuning in, this is Nashville, and I'm your host, Khalil Ekulona. We're talking about bucket lists. So, Jeremy, when you reached this moment where you thought life wasn't going to be what you thought it would be, how did your goals change?
Well, I'd already experienced a lot of pretty incredible things that the average person hadn't gone through, and I think there was effort that was involved in that, but also a lot of luck. But I thought that my life was essentially over. I thought, okay, I'm not in the sense of dying, but like if I were to sober up, I wouldn't have much more of a life. I would have to give up my career. I would have to give up all these things. And I did at first. I took some time away from my career, and then I found help. I instead of trying to take on everything myself, I started meeting with people that could help me. And then my world really started to open up to where I realized that, my identity wasn't just Jeremy the musician or Jeremy the person with a substance abuse issues, but the world was open for me to redefine myself. And that's when things, my love for the outdoors, I'd also given up smoking, so I would, every time I wanted a cigarette, I would just sprint down the street. And then eventually that made it around the block, and then that just kept going up and up, and now I'm a runner.
Okay, I want to ask you about that in a second. You've set and accomplished a number of goals for yourself. Here's a little one we have here.
Just about mile 44. New territory. This is the furthest I've ever been. Woo! Think I'm gonna do it.
Okay, so you go from running a sprint just down the block to covering the block, and then suddenly mile 44? Come on. So at this point, like a 50-mile race isn't even your longest run anymore, I'm sure, huh?
No, I did my first 100 in October, and then this September I'm running from Flagstaff to the Grand Canyon, which will be another 100-miler.
Okay, I know people who don't even want to drive 100 miles, and you ran 100 miles. So this is how it ended up on your bucket list. Tell me, like, as you've made this total life change, this philosophical change, what happens to you when you're out there on the road running?
It's a celebration. I knew I was that close to death. Now I want to see what I'm capable of, and I know that I'm capable of overcoming a lot of pain. And on the other side of that pain is a remarkable sense of self and a spiritual connection, and it's a celebration. So I run to celebrate that I'm alive.
Okay, so we have one of our listeners, Danielle, left us a message about the Grand Canyon and the experience. Here it is.
I've heard other people say similar about the Grand Canyon. It's so majestic and beautiful and just otherworldly that you have to see it and have to be there to even know the feeling of being there. It's like it reminds you that there's a bigger something, right? It's whether that be God, the universe, there's something, right, that created such beauty.
So I hear you're on a mission to see all 63 national parks.
Yes.
How many have you seen so far?
I just hit my 29th, actually, in Arizona a few weeks ago. I went to Petrified Forest National Park. So I'm approaching the halfway mark. But so when I was detoxing, which was very, very scary, I had my laptop and I watched Ken Burns' The National Parks, America's Greatest Idea. And I was a mess. I was like in a fetal position, dry heaving, and thought I was going to die for 3 days. But I would turn over and see these beautiful, majestic parks and these serene trees and epic vistas. And I was like, okay, if I live through this, I'm going to see this. Mm-hmm. I'm going to do this. And every year since then, I have a few that I hit. And I got to one 2 or 3 weeks ago, and I'll be back at the Grand Canyon here in a couple months as well.
Anything else planned for this year besides the Grand Canyon?
I'm really hoping to make it out to Glacier. That's the next big one on my list.
So, Nicholas, do you have an actual bucket list?
So my bucket list, I would say, still consists of impacting others. I have like a little quote says, aspire to inspire. So when I aspire to do good things, that inspires others. So I'm still taking care of myself. But it kind of comes back around to Jeremy. Like, I love to travel. So my grandfather and my mother, they both like kind of instilled that in me. My mom, whenever she would go on a trip, she would take us too. Then my grandfather, he's traveled like the world, the pyramids and things like that. So I've always wanted to travel. It's funny you was talking about the national parks. I don't know if you've seen the Netflix thing with Obama, how he's doing the national parks. It's on Netflix. I don't want to give any wrong blurs. But anyway, yeah, check it out. But yeah, the president, he goes around, he goes to the different national parks and talk about them. And last night I learned about Patagonia. And I'm like, I definitely want to go there next and like see.
And South America.
Yeah. And how amazing that is. But yeah, traveling and just enjoying life. Every time I breathe, every time I wake up in the morning, like I'm really just happy because I'm still here. Like one thing that I have realized, a lot of people have not had my outcome with HIV and or AIDS. A lot of, with my skin color, with my demographic as being a gay male. So I'm really just like taking the lease on life and really enjoying like what the Creator, what God has instilled within me. So whether it's traveling, whether it's putting on events through my organization, things of that nature, it's all about living out that bucket list by inspiring others and stuff and just making that impact.
What lesson do you want to pass on to anybody listening?
Sometimes you need to take the path less traveled. In high school, one of my favorite poems was by Robert Frost. I don't want to say the wrong title, but it's about the road less traveled. And I never really understood that. I was taught that in a leadership class, but I never understood that until I actually went on the road that was less traveled. And one thing he does say is the road that he traveled that was less made all the difference. And that has made all the difference in my life with HIV. And a lot of times people ask me, if you could go back, would you change your diagnosis or anything like that? And I would say, honestly, no, because the life that I believe that I had planned out for me, the life that I believe I had prepared for me is far less significant than what I'm truly living out right now.
Jeremy, 30 seconds, same question.
I want to tour with a band across the country. I want to do the Appalachian Trail, the Pacific Crest. But most importantly, I want to help other people see that there's a brighter side to living, that if you're struggling with mental health issues, with addiction, there are people that can help you, and life is much better without them.
Very inspiring words by two inspiring humans. I want to really thank you both for coming on to the show. That was Nicholas Calvin and Jeremy Lister. Thank you again both for joining us today. It's really been an honor and a pleasure to be with you both.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So now, as you know, a bucket list is a list all the things that you want to do before you die. Kicking the bucket, that's where the term comes from. Our producer, Tasha A.F. Lemley, simply could not let us end today without thinking about and honoring that passage from life to death. Hills of Calvary is one of our many local cemeteries, this one northwest of downtown. It also happens to be the home of our indigent burials. Burials Metro Social Services provides for people who weren't claimed per se, or who didn't have enough money to be cremated or buried. People like Aaron Smith. Tasha takes it from here.
Since Aaron Smith is considered abandoned, the city pays for his casket and burial. There's no one here to see him off, except for the men who crank his casket into the ground and a few volunteers like Reverend Jay Voorhees.
Mr. Smith, Aaron Smith, and again, we know nothing. We know that he was abandoned, which means that he had no family or no one claim his body. No one needs to die alone. No one needs to be alone at their funeral.
That belief is why Reverend Jay is here today. He's part of a new program called Call the Name. It's a small group that shows up at Hills of Calvary anytime someone is at risk of being buried without being acknowledged, even infants. There's not much notice before the burials happen, sometimes less than a day.
Burials are usually scheduled on a 15-minute basis, every 15 minutes. And so we do one, they'll go ahead and fill the grave, and then we'll move to the next one.
But when they do happen, there can be as many as 8 in one morning, Jay says. Today it's 4.
Well, friends, if we want to go ahead and get started, Kendra, would you be willing to do the introduction part, and then Janet's going to say a prayer, and I'll close this out for Aaron Smith.
We gather today to remember the life of Aaron Smith, our neighbor and resident of our city. We come today to call out his name, remembering him on behalf of all who knew and loved him. This body we commit to the ground, earth to earth, ashes to
Today,
ashes.
all who mourn the loss of Aaron Smith, we wish for them comfort and peace. And may God's perpetual life be found in this place. May Aaron's name never be forgotten. Amen.
Kendra and Reverend Jay pay their respects to another man this morning, Marty Holloway, who does have friends here from his community at the village at Glencliff. They knew him, lived with him, and Cecily Eiler, she helped send him off with prayers and poetry.
Consider the lilies behind the supermarket, thrown in the dumpster. And yet I say unto you, that even Solomon in all his glory was not arrayed like one of these. And yet, this system has discarded them. Will it not also throw you away? But your heavenly Father provides for you, O ye of little faith, and lets you find beauty in the dumpster. And it just feels like something Marty would have loved to share with me, because he found beauty everywhere, and we loved him for it.
Do you know if anything was on his bucket list that he got to accomplish, or something that he wanted to and he didn't get to?
So one of our friends of the village, his name is Nelson, bought tickets for the Dolphins game, and that was one thing that he really wanted to do. And it was so cold and wet and rainy, and his immune system wasn't, where we wanted it to be, and he still wanted to go, and it kept pouring down, so he didn't get to. But I know that the main thing that he wanted for himself was housing, and so I'm so glad that he lived and left the village with dignity and a roof over his head.
The last voice you heard was Zoe Caldwell from the Village at Glencliff. We're happy to hear that Marty got to check something off his bucket list: housing. I know it's one thing that a lot of us who have it take for granted. Thanks to everyone who tuned in this hour. Join us tomorrow for an hour on our sister station WNXP's Artist of the Month, The New Respects. This is Nashville is a production of WPLN News and Nashville Public Radio. Listen back at thisisnashville.org or wherever you get your podcasts. Our producers are Steve Harush, Rose Gilbert, and Tasha A.F. Lemley. Our digital lead is Anna Gallegos-Cannon. Michaela Elias is our technical director. Our executive producer is Andrea Tudhope. The masterminds behind our theme music are Larange and Namir Blade. Special thanks to Mac Huffington, Susan Sizemore, Tammy Roth, Melvin Fowler, and Jennifer Wilkins. The conversation doesn't end here. Tweet us at This Is Nashville, find us on Facebook and Instagram, and tell us what you want from our show by filling out our quick survey online. This is Nashville. I'm Khalil Ekulona. We'll see you tomorrow, everybody, and be good to each other.